Let's start with introductions. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves to everybody here? Domenic, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Domenic Thomas. I'm the CEO of Worbli. As Shaheen described, we have a fork based on fintech. And the reason why we forked is because you need financial compliance at a core level in order to meet the global standards. And we didn't think we could enforce that on mainnet. It would be really difficult. Everybody would have to go through AML KYC. And, it would be a lot of hassle. So we're baking it in at a fundamental level in our chain. But we are in total cooperation with mainnet. Everything we're doing is just to add value. We have an airdrop that's going to be based on a 9/7 snapshot. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo.
Turn my volume down.
It's just coming through my mic, I guess, because of Crowdcast. So we're really excited. The chain's going to launch on 9/14. We just got our testnet up last week, and we're looking forward to bringing financial services to the EOS ecosystem.
Awesome. It's an exciting project. Is it Didier? Am I saying that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's Didier.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'm Didier Martin, the CEO of Interblockchain. So our main focus is to build interblockchains. And what I mean by that is strictly the connection between the blockchains. So we don't develop any blockchains, we link them, which is quite different. Actually, we already developed interblockchains for Bitcoin, like Ripple, EOS. EOS is actually under development, Stellar, and then what else? What else I'm missing? Of course, Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. So to link all these guys, currently, what we have. Oh, there's a window appeared. So currently, what we have in production is basically the communication between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and Stellar, and like I said, under development with EOS. As you probably can infer, the problems that we can have linking heterogeneous blockchains together is totally different than the problems you have to resolve to build a blockchain. Mainly because a blockchain is at the base a replicated ledger. A network can host, obviously like EOS or Ethereum can host several ledgers, but basically it is a single ledger replicated on several nodes. Obviously on EOS there is a minor difference, or maybe a major difference in some cases, because you can also have an account per user and not a centralized ledger in a map like you can have on Ethereum or Stellar. So the main thing is that the interblockchain is not really a single ledger, is that you have to not to replicate on their end node. You have basically, and this is why it is so tricky, you have to do a single transaction on each network. So the source and the destination network, either if you do a swap in exchanging tokens from one to the other, or what could be totally different with what we see today on the blockchains, to move a token from one blockchain to another. So it means at the bottom line that you transform highly dependent on a single technology these tokens and make them really virtual, like fiat money is today. Fiat money today is totally virtual. I can have a bank based on Oracle. I can have another bank hosting the ledger on the blockchain, for example, and it is still a dollar. So the dollar is virtual because it's not dependent on a single technology. However, in the blockchain realm, the tokens are highly dependent on a single technology. So by introducing the interblockchains or communication between the blockchain or the capacity to move a token from one chain to another, it simply makes them virtual. So the same characteristic as fiat money, but we know with all the other advantages that we see in the blockchains today. So that's basically what we do.
Great, thanks. So that kind of, I think, started to answer the what is inter-blockchain communication, but I don't know if Domenic, do you want to add anything to kind of that question as we move forward? Or do you want to just kind of jump to the next questions?
I think that, I mean, that's a fantastic explanation. I can talk a little bit practically. I'm not as deep into the technical layer, but you know, the ability to connect the blockchain so that we have a record and we can bring them all together into sort of a universe. Like that's how I describe EOS, is that, you know, some of these different blockchains like Worbli can be like galaxies, but we can have this universe that we're all interacting and the information is consistent across the chains, not only the financial transactions, you know, and the tokens, but potentially like user account data. So one of the things we're hoping for is that we're going to go through this process of verifying all of the users on our chain, that they're through AML KYC. There is likely to be a sort of a credit scoring system. We're in discussion with Credify, which is a identification and reputation application that's being built on EOS right now. And, you know, we want all this information to kind of move with the user's account, right? We don't want people to have to like log in and log out and right? It's all about usability. We want to make this simple for people. So that's our hope with IBC and our main interest in it.
I really like that analogy because, you know, I'm a big fan of making complicated topics simple. And I like that analogy of like, you know, you could look at each blockchain as its own little galaxy, and the bigger blockchain space is the universe. And going back to what you said, Didier, how do we get these, you know, credit or Bitcoin, let's say Bitcoin, for example, right? Bitcoin, you know, like you're saying, kind of currently exists just in its own galaxy, or only has value in its own galaxy. How do we get that value to be present in the bigger universe, kind of beyond the space of just the Bitcoin technology itself? And I think that's kind of the big question. Let me kind of move on to, so why do you guys think that inter-blockchain communication hasn't taken off yet? I mean, for example, you know, Didier, this is the first time hearing about your company and kind of what you guys have been up to. Why is this not something that is kind of moving forward, or something that people have really heard about much yet? Is the technology not there? What are the barriers here?
Yeah, can answer that. Simply because, like guys from Polkadot and all that, they focused at first mainly to build a blockchain. That's the problem, in fact, behind that, because in our case, we focus on the different side. We never, we say the other guys, they'll build the blockchains, and we don't do that. This is not our core focus. We focus mainly on the inter-blockchain. So we focused on the hard part, basically. And the other guys, they took the easy part, you know, because building a blockchain, you have a lot of recipes. The main problem is to link them. One of the first problems we encountered, and this is, I guess, why you don't see a lot of implementation. It's that when you do an inter-blockchain, you can do only a single transaction on each one. So you can imagine the huge security problem that you can have there. The second thing also, especially if you want to move the tokens in that case, and you want to allow people to fragment it. Let's say I take a Bitcoin and I move that Bitcoin on the EOS network, whatever the network, all the different EOS flavors, because basically they will interact, or we will interact from the outside world in the same way. So they will be seen by an inter-blockchain system exactly as the same. So if you want to move that Bitcoin to a EOS network, in that case, on the EOS network, because they all have a different consensus system, they all have different interfaces. So you will need at first to create a mirror Bitcoin on the EOS network. That's the first step, with exactly the same characteristic. And then, as soon as you have that, and also in that case, you have different languages. So that's the other problem, because on EOS, it's C++, on Ethereum, that's Solidity, on Neo, that's C#, and Trezor, it's another one. So it's the Tower of Babel, basically, with all these networks, because you have different languages. But so that's one step why you don't see that interblockchain, because you have to deal with all these different languages. So you have to be a company having multi-language skills. So to take again this example of the Bitcoin that you move to EOS, so you first do a replica with the same characteristic, and then you have to get a transaction on the Bitcoin network, and you have to put that on a specific account, like a reserve. Why? Because you want to allow that Bitcoin to be moved to EOS, spent there, and fragmented there. So let's say you do a transaction, and then you have a third of a Bitcoin. You cannot do something like atomic swap, because atomic swap is the total value each time. How can you redeem it back to Bitcoin? You can't, unless you have a reserve where you can, again, do the transaction on the other network. So it implies several factors. It implies that you need a reserve in order to be able to move them back and forth between these networks. And then, because it could become a huge honeypot, because you can imagine if people move a lot of these tokens, it means there is a lot of value stored on this reserve. So then you have to make it very safe. So the other main difficulty, I would say, apart from the different languages and the adaptation to the different APIs that you have on the different blockchains, is the security problem, that you have to protect as much as possible this reserve. So you can see why now nobody did that. In fact, we've been working on that, on these problems since the last 2 years, and we made a lot of mistakes, a lot of trials, and a lot of errors, and we finally learned how to do it. And so that's why in the following weeks we'll show to the world the first time movement between heterogeneous networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, in the following weeks to EOS, hopefully in September.
Yeah.
So this is why you don't see them, because it's a big problem. Like my partners say, it's a big fucking problem to resolve.
Yeah, you bring up some good points, and I think for a lot of people who haven't thought much about this, I think most people haven't thought as much about this as you have, Didier. Didier was referencing the fact that if you are trying to transfer value from one chain to another without creating new value or double spending issue, you have to lock up somehow the value that you're trying to transfer from one chain to the other on the original chain. When I talked about side chains a second ago, they use a complex smart contract to lock in the value of the tokens that you're transferring to another, so those can't be used again in the little galaxy. If you're moving from one galaxy to the other, you have to lock up that value in one galaxy so you could have use of it in another galaxy, and it can't be used in both at the same time. And so just kind of for the audience, that's what he's referencing. Domenic, so tell us a little bit about, because your Worbli is a good example of two galaxies perhaps interacting between the Worbli network and the EOS mainnet. Do you want to kind of address those same issues as far as like giving the users a practical view? Because I like what Didier was doing, kind of giving a concrete example, right? Let's take this abstract ideas and give people like, what does that mean to a typical user? How would a typical user of the EOS mainnet or the Worbli mainnet, how would they interact, or how would these tokens interact through interblockchain communication?
Yeah, so this is exactly the type of transactions we want to see happen. As I was saying earlier, we don't want users to have to sort of log into one account and then another. So for example, because we're EOS, we don't have all of the challenges that Didier was talking about, like, different programming languages, right? Our underlying blockchain technology is going to be the same as mainnet. We'll have some different smart contracts and some different governance, but that's not really material, as my understanding, as far as, the communication between the chains. We do have a different core token. The Worbli token is going to be similar to the EOS mainnet token in that it is the foundational token of our chain. And then if someone has a side chain on Worbli, that will be in relation to the Worbli token. But we've talked to a bunch of the devs that have built like wallets, for example, for mainnet, and there's a way in which our token can be held in that wallet, but we don't want it to be a situation where someone has to like log into their Worbli account and then maybe transfer that token over, and then even if they do, how are you going to value it, right? And how are you going to interact with the different dApps? So for example, let's say on mainnet, somebody has an application that a user wants to engage with and it costs 1 EOS. Well, we don't know that Worbli's token's worth 1 EOS. That would be awesome, but I don't know that we'll be there anytime soon. So these things have to be accounted for, and it is very complex. And I think to Didier's point, the other reason it's not happening is that so far there isn't a lot of incentive for some of these blockchains. Why do you want, for example, let's say Ethereum and Lisk, right? These are two platforms that are kind of competing for developers, right? Lisk is this, JavaScript-based, platform. It's the JavaScript stack. They're trying to get devs to build on them. Ethereum's Solidity. They want devs to build in there, right? So I think sometimes you get this sort of scarcity mindset going on, right? People kind of want to be proprietary. They're just focused on developing their chain and attracting as many users as possible. But I think that's short-sighted, where some of these, the folks building these chains need to step back a little bit and think about that user experience. Most of us involved in blockchain at this point are fairly technical. I'm not a programmer, but I was a Bitcoin miner, and I can boot up a Linux distro and run CG miner and do a little bit of command line. Again, I'm enough to be dangerous and break things, but I'm comfortable with that. But when I go and talk to the average person, a friend of mine socially who doesn't know anything about blockchain, and I start talking about wallets and all this stuff, forget about it. They're gone. They're just lost. And so if that user is going to need, a dozen accounts to interact with blockchain, to interact with that one dApp on Lisk that they really like, and that one EOS dApp and that one Ethereum dApp, it's just not going to work. I don't see that as it needs to be a seamless user experience. And so I'm excited about the work that Didier and his team are doing. I wasn't even aware of them till now. I definitely want to get connected with you. I'm part of another group where we have people from BitShares and some folks who are very familiar with the DPoS, the delegated proof of stake. Because there's some issues there too with nodes that Didier was getting into. It's going to be a little tricky when you have a proof of work chain, a proof of stake chain, and a DPoS chain trying to interact, because all those nodes, maybe they communicate differently for the chain itself. So there's challenges, but I think this is absolutely paramount to adoption. Has to happen. It's a big focus for Worbli. Once we get our chain launched, we are going to be dedicating resources to work with anybody out there to try to make this happen.
And also, we have a good metaphor for that. Actually, there is roughly 80% of more than that, but you can see all these tokens are used today mainly for speculation. And it means that they are kind of locked in a safe, The good thing is that the safe is making money, which is, better than the usual safe. But even though it is locked in a kind of safe, and we cannot spend it or use it as we want to use it, like, for example, go to the store. Yeah. So the good point about EOS in that case is the speed that it will have, being 3 or 4 seconds to get a transaction is in par with Visa or MasterCard. So it means basically that now we are at a point where the technology is at a stage where I can go to the store and not have to wait for an hour. Imagine you want to buy something at the corner store, and then you have to wait for an hour until say, okay, that's it, your account is right. It doesn't make sense, but 3-4 seconds, yes, it's like Visa, MasterCard. So it means that now this old money stored in these safes could be used. So the point, if we can bring at least 80 to 90% of this whole value in a chain like Worbli, and then it means that they have now access for e-commerce or financial transaction or insurance or whatever it is, of roughly several billions, in a matter of seconds or a matter of time, it takes to transfer that. So the way we think about it is that people today in their financial world, they have a safe account or investments, which kind of an extension of the saving account, and they have an operation account. So operation account being to spend the money, and the other one to increase the money or store it for later use. So I think the next phase will be, because it's not there yet, because we are still in the speculation phase. The second phase will be to bring that money, that huge amount of money, to bring into the market. So, and I guess one of these EOS networks, obviously for us, we see all the EOS networks as a single unit, basically, because they have the same interface. So we deal with an EOS network. We hope that all these networks will use, as soon as the interblockchain within EOS is ready, that it will all talk together, because it will be easier, because it's in the same system. It will mean a huge potential in that case, because we'll have different specialized networks, but being able to all communicate together within the EOS realm. And so us, from the interblockchain point of view, we have to deal with a single blockchain, single kind of interface, even if it's different blockchains, and bring them either for services or bring them to be spent finally. So if we take, actually the blockchains that we support represent roughly 80% of total capitalization. It's funny because there are only 7 to 8 of them. If you take the 10 tokens that you have on CoinMarketCap, roughly you have a little bit more than 80%. 20% is all the others. So 80% of the total capitalization is within the 10 first tokens that you see on, and EOS is in a good position on that. So if we can bring that huge amount of money to the other next generations, because I guess EOS will evolve and we'll see also new improvement on that. So if we can bring these total money to these new networks, geez, that's good, because now we can, have freedom for all technologies and let them evolve and compete. And also it means that blockchains can compete each again on the basis of their technological or advantage or benefits, instead of being monopolies like Bitcoin is. If you look at it, all these guys are basically small monopolies, because Bitcoin, you have to deal only with Bitcoin. That's it.
Yeah. Didier, sorry to cut you off, but I think June's saying that we're kind of running out of time. Domenic, do you have any last thoughts, or should we just close it off here, guys?
Yeah, I can be quick. I absolutely agree with Didier's position here. We need to bring the value kind of into play, make it more than just speculation, make it useful. That's the whole point of blockchain. If we want to change the world, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be a sort of interchangeable, right? We have these competitions between chains, but when you're getting user adoption, if we have to get them to adopt each chain individually along the way, that's just too long of a user journey. It's too much friction for the customer. And I think if people take a step back, they realize that it's that whole thing, right? Do you want to fight for a pie that's this big, or do you want to expand the pie? And that's what I see in EOS. We get this discussion about forks, but forks are spectacular once you put IBC into play, because all that does is expand that universe, right? It really becomes a way in which we can do so many specialized things. I want to talk to you about a medical fork. I think we need a HIPAA compliant medical fork, for example, in EOS. You're not going to be able to do that in mainnet with an open governance model, but this is what we want, right? EOS to become this enterprise operating system in one user account. That's what it comes down to.
Yes.
So thank you guys. This has been spectacular, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Pleasure to see you again, Domenic, and to meet you, Didier. Really fascinated with both of the work that you guys are doing. And if you guys want to drop, links to your website so people can kind of look at the different organizations that you guys are working on and projects that you guys are working with, that'd be great for the entire audience.
Yeah, sure. Looking forward working with you, Domenic. Because I'm quite interested also.
Absolutely, yeah. Please send me an email. Let's get talking.
Okay, we'll do that. See you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys. Great job. The panel and the moderation, Shaheen and Didier and Domenic. Great job, guys. We'll see you out in the community, and look forward to a big future with IBC. So take care, guys.